Good morning to you all at the Priory School. The Lord be with you. I'm going to light a candle as I start this collective worship to remind me and you and everyone that God is welcome here as we keep thinking about our theme of hope. I hope I can light this without any accidents, so I'll take a moment to concentrate. There we go. Well, it's getting near to the end of November and I was thinking about hope and I was remembering the kind of things I would hope for at this time of year when I was as young as you are now. And I remembered that it was always about this time of year, towards the end of November, that I would write my Christmas list. When I was very little, my sister and I would write down a list of all the things we hoped for as Christmas presents. I've written a list myself this year. There we go. I'm not really sure if I'll get any of it. It doesn't really matter to me as much as it did when I was little. It's really just for fun. But when I was little, I was desperate to get those presents. It was the most exciting time of the year coming up, and so I really hoped that I would get them. And my mum used to say to me, well, maybe if you're really good, what a promise. Maybe if I was really, really good, I thought, I would get some of the things that I hoped for. Maybe if I was quite good, I thought I'd get some of them. And if I was amazingly, stupendously good, then I would perhaps get all of them. That was what I thought. So I always made my mind up to try and be extra specially good from then on. I don't know if you do the same thing. But actually, what usually happened then after a day or two was that I forgot that I was trying to be good, and a lot of the time, even when I actually remembered and was trying really hard to be good, somehow I'd seem to mess it up and end up getting into trouble and being told off. So sometimes I'd work really hard at being good just before Christmas to try and make up for the times that I'd been told off for the rest of the year. I don't know if any of you do that. But every year, when Christmas came, what I got seemed to have very little to do with what I'd hoped for or how I'd actually behaved. Some years I was quite naughty, I must admit, but I still got a nice present. Other years I worked really hard to be good and I got something I didn't particularly want or ask for, like new socks or maybe a useful dictionary. Dictionaries are obviously good, teachers, we know that, but they don't make a very good Christmas present. It didn't really seem like my bartering system, my system of trying to swap good behaviour in the hopes of getting presents. It didn't really seem like that worked when I was young. Over 2,000 years ago, as you will all know, probably, no one actually celebrated Christmas. Well, why was that? Because Christ, Jesus, hadn't been born, so people didn't celebrate his birth. But there were still other festivals to celebrate, and there was no festival quite so special as the festival of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was the holiest festival in the whole Jewish calendar. Yom Kippur was called the Day of Atonement, and it was as important as Christmas, even more perhaps. Here's a picture I found, a painting of people gathering in a temple. You can see some stained glass in the background of that temple. And they're all gathering, and the man in the front, I think, is a teacher, a Jewish teacher, and he's holding probably the books of the Torah there. But it was a really important day, Yom Kippur, and it was every bit as important as Christmas. And on that day, everyone, absolutely everyone, would gather and pray. And there would be offerings and sacrifices made, like special presents, but given to God. You see, God's chosen people were every bit as naughty and disobedient as very naughty children. In fact, they were like grown-ups, which is much worse. And on that day of atonement, they hoped that God would see all the special sacrifices, the gifts and the presents that they were giving to him and the prayers they were making, and they hoped that he would then forgive their mistakes and be good to them for the whole rest of the year. Really, they gave gifts to God to say sorry they had misbehaved, to say sorry for all the things that they'd done wrong, and to ask for God's friendship again. For God's chosen people, the people of Israel, it was a bit like Christmas, but in reverse. The problem was that all those gifts were never going to make God happy. He didn't have a wish list of presents that he wanted. I mean, when you've created everything, you don't need a wish list. What God really wanted then, as now, what he really hoped for, was the same as he wants now, and it was that we should be friends with him and friends with each other. I found a picture to represent that. Lots of different people in a heart shape. That was all that God really hoped for. He wants us to be friends with him, and he wants us to be friends with each other. Well, thinking about Yom Kippur reminded me how when I was little I often messed up, and as Christmas got nearer I would be less interested in presents, the things you get and unwrap. And what I would really want was that at Christmas time my family would be all happy and would get along. That my dad wouldn't complain about the dinner and go off in a sulk, that my sister and I wouldn't have a row and get into trouble, that my mum wouldn't be angry or disappointed and tell me off. Even when I was really little, what I really, really wanted at Christmas was that there would be a peaceful, happy time at home, that we could all be friends and have fun. So I would often try and make presents or cards for my family that showed them how much I loved them. I'd try to make presents that took time and effort, that somehow showed my family, no matter how much I'd messed up or how naughty I'd been, that I did love them and that I hoped that they would forgive me and love me too. I found a picture that I think represents that as well. It's an I'm sorry cake. That's exactly the kind of thing I would have liked to have made if I could have baked at the time. That was really what the Day of Atonement, what Yom Kippur, the feast day, was about. On that day, God's people, God's children, the people of Israel, wanted to fix their relationship with God. And that relationship was what made them really special and held them together. Because back then, no other nation, no other land or people had such a special relationship with God as they had. God had helped and looked after them time and time again through their history. And they should have followed God's rules and been great ambassadors for God, but time and time again they let God down. They ignored his rules, they broke his commandments, they were horrible to each other. They even invented shiny little pretend gods to worship instead of the real one. So on the Day of Atonement, every year, they tried to say, sorry we messed up so much. Please give our relationship another chance and say that we are still your people, God. But the problem was, as I said, that God didn't want special presents on one day of the year. What God really wanted then was the same as what God always wants. He wants us to be friends with him, and he wants us to get on with each other every single day. I found a picture that reminded me of the one in the hall. I think it's supposed to be world friendship. That was what God hoped for. That was all that was really ever on God's list. What the people of Israel didn't know was that God was already planning the perfect gift, both for the people of Israel and for the whole rest of the world. And it was a gift that would achieve that hope. And because God had made up his mind to give it, it didn't depend on anyone being naughty or nice to receive it. And at that very first Christmas, what God hoped and what all of God's people hoped arrived. God gave the gift that would mean we would always be his people. And I found a picture that represents that. God gave a gift that meant no matter how we messed up, nothing would keep us apart because God was coming to be with us in person. God with us. Love and peace in our relationship with God, no matter how we've messed up. A friend who will not turn his back on us, no matter how badly we've behaved. And a Father in heaven who will never abandon us. We will always be his children. Hope that can't be taken away. Hope that things will be okay in the end, because God doesn't have a list of naughty and of nice. He only has one list of all his children, and no one's marked naughty or nice on it. Everyone on that list is simply beloved. So I haven't actually made a sorry cake lately, and I don't really worry so much about being naughty or nice or trying to please people. Instead, I just try to be kind, like Jesus taught us, and brave, like he showed us, and to stand up for what is right, like he did. And I know that when I mess up or fail, and yes, I still do that a lot, God is right there, ready to forgive me. Not because I give him a fancy present, but because that's his gift to me and to you. I hope that will give you something to feel hopeful about, even as we move into December and the season of Advent. Even if you didn't have God's love or forgiveness written on your Christmas list, they are yours, because you are God's children and you are on God's Christmas list. I'm going to finish now by saying the Lord's Prayer, and I invite you to join in with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. So go in hope and in peace, to love and to serve the Lord. In the name of Christ. Amen.